That's good to know. I'm going to start off with a song this morning. It's not in your books, but it will be on the screen. And y'all have the advantage of notes. Skipper, I need some help. No, I'm pushing the wrong button. Always helps. Y'all know this song? It's an older song. It's one of those that got knocked out of the book, our book anyway. Not a step will I take without Jesus. Y'all know this? You know it, you just don't remember that you know it. Let's try it together. Not a step will I take without Jesus is a vow that my heart has made. Often am tempted to leave him, yet unto him my heart is stayed. Not a step will I take, not a step without him will I go. He will lead me along to that beautiful home over there. Not a step will I take without Jesus as I travel upon life's way. Though temptations may be all around me, I will follow my Lord each day. Not a step take, not a step without him will I go. He will lead me along to that beautiful home over there. Not a step will I take without Jesus. Where he leads, I will never stray from the path that will lead me to glory, to that land of eternal day. Not a step will I take, not a step without him will I go. He will lead me along to that beautiful home over there. See, I told you knew it. You just didn't remember you knew it. Or knowed it. I think that's how it goes. Knowed it. Isn't that the right word? K-N-O-W-D. Okay, we're starting out bad already. Laugh when the preacher tells a joke. Amen when he says amen. John, there's a corner over there for you. If you would, open up that document I sent to you this morning and make sure it's ready in case I need it, please. Well, that's not what I wanted. Skipper, is there another one? Nope, there it is. That's what I'm looking for right there. Driving Forces of the Last Days. I think it's a book written back in the 1980s. I haven't read the book. I read the introduction to the book, and that made me think I don't want to read the rest of the book. It doesn't have anything for me. But the title, I thought, was great. In the introduction, he tells me that he was driving down the road, and he spoke to Jesus, and Jesus spoke to him and told him, you need to write a book. Well, what am I going to write about? Well, I want you to write about the driving forces of the last days. And, well, what am I going to say about it? And Jesus told him what to say. So that made me think, that's not the book for me, but nevertheless, I like the title, Driving Forces of the Last Days. If you were to guess what he's going to say in this book, or what anyone would say in this book, the driving forces of the last days. What would you say? What kind of things would you think are some of the driving forces of the last days? Chaos is probably a good word for that. He uses lawlessness, deception, and rebellion. I think the lawlessness and the rebellion probably, in my mind, would be one and the same, but I didn't read what he defines it or how he defines it, but nevertheless, that's his thought. According to him, Jesus told him that lawlessness, deception, and rebellion are the driving forces of our day and time. Would you agree or disagree with that? I think he's not wrong in the title. Again, I didn't read the book to see what he says. His leading into the book made me think I'm not going to depend on what all he has to say. Last week, we were talking about the question, and I'm afraid to click the PowerPoint because apparently they're all messed up. Well, there it is. We were talking about the question, why do some people have a heart for God? Why do some people not have a heart for God? And we talked about a little bit the Calvinist perspective that God created some to be holy, God created some not to be holy, and that's not a just God. I mean, when I say just, we understand the term justice, and that's not it. If God makes you evil, created you to be evil, and then condemns you for being evil, that's not justice. And the Bible says that God's throne, the foundation of God's throne, is justice. And I heard one preacher say one time that God's justice is different than our justice. He is sovereign, and so he can make up his own rules and then tell us what justice needs. Well, that's not how God works. God doesn't use his sovereignty in that way from what I can read in the scriptures. He doesn't hold us accountable to something that he doesn't hold himself accountable to. So all that said, the Calvinist perspective of God made some to be saved, some to be lost, I just think that's not a godly thing or a thing that God would do. We talked about last week free will. One of the reasons that some people have a heart for God and some people do not is we all have free will. And that's true. We make our own decision, and God did give us the ability to make those decisions. Some people have a heart for God and some people do not have a heart for God. We talked about last week because of varied life experiences. Somebody experienced this and it drove them away from God. Somebody experienced this and it drove them to God. And we won't go back into all of that this morning, but just remember that, like personal trauma. My child was stillborn, or my child died in the swimming pool, and why would God do that to me and then drive themselves away from God? And that happens. That people have that reaction to a poor concept of God. I would label it as that. We talked about how pride sometimes gets in our way. How can pride get in my way of having a heart for God? Yeah, I don't need God. I can do this myself. And we think that we don't hate God or dislike God, but I'm capable of ruling my own life. I can do this myself, and it does. It gets between us and God, and the heart is for self-reliance rather than it is for God reliance. And the pride part of it is I won't say inability, but using that free will, I suppose is the better word, using that free will not to submit. We don't like to be forced to submit. Slavery is forced submission, and we don't like that. We want to rule our own lives, and so when God tells us you have to do this, you have to do that, well, if I have to do that, then I have to submit to him, and my pride is too good for that. So that gets in the way of people's relationship with God. Another thing we talked about last week is the unanswered questions of life. One particularly we spoke about is Where does evil come from? And if God allows it, then he's not the kind of God I want to worship. We don't have a heart for God because we don't like the way God operates in, or how we feel God operates in this world. Not going to go back into all of that, but just wanted to kind of rehearse a little bit what we talked about last week. Sometimes sinful conduct is rebellion in every sense of the word. Maybe I need to clarify that. Sometimes when we use the word rebellion, well, let me just stop right there. When you use the word rebellion, what comes to your mind? What are you thinking when you think of the word rebellion? Stubborn? I'm sorry? I hear, oh, there you are. Political, oh, okay. Political demonstration sometimes can be a rebellious thing, or done in a rebellious nature, and sometimes today it's just awful how they do it. Yes, ma'am. One more. Acting against authority. Okay, so we have that concept of rebellion when we use that word. In that context, using that kind of definition, and that's the same kind of definition that comes to my mind when I use the word rebellion, but in that context, using that definition, in your opinion, did Adam and Eve have a rebellious spirit? Understand my question. Did Adam and Eve have a rebellious spirit? Using our term rebellion, it can be said that they rebelled against God. They did something contrary, who said it, to authority, God's authority. But did they have a rebellious spirit that says, I don't like God, I don't want anything to do with God, I just want to go my own way? Is that the issue with Adam and Eve? No, it's not. I'm sorry? Lured is Dennis's word. Deceived is the word I think of. They were lured is a really good word. They didn't, from what I read in the account of Genesis, they didn't just defy God in the sense, I don't want anything to do with God. There is an example of that in the Bible, or probably several examples, but the one that came to my mind is the prodigal son. Did he have a rebellious spirit? Yeah, I think he did. He said, I don't want to be under your rule. I don't want to be under your house. I don't want anything to do with you. I want to go my own way, do what I want to do. And he had a rebellious spirit that drove him away from his father. I don't see that as descriptive of Adam and Eve. And I'll bring that to a point eventually. I don't see that as the spirit of everybody in the world who has gone away from God. It is the spirit of some in the world, maybe many, maybe even most in the world, who have gone away from God. But not everyone who has disobeyed God has done so with a rebellious spirit. Does that mean they didn't rebel? No, they rebelled. They went against God's authority, but it wasn't an active thing they wanted to do necessarily. Yeah. Okay, so their desire led them into, Satan used their own fleshly desire. Is fleshly desire a bad thing? We're going to, everybody in here is going to eat something today. Probably, as soon as the preacher shuts up this afternoon, you're going to head to a restaurant and you're going to get something to eat. Why? You're hungry. You have a desire for food. That desire for food is not sinful. You can use it in a sinful way, but it's not desire. The desire itself in and of itself is not sinful. A sexual desire, is that sinful? God said it's a blessing. Use it. He actually that's the first command. Use that sexual desire that you have for one another to reproduce in this world. God wants you to have it. But it can be used in an ungodly way, in a rebellious way, yes? So the fleshly desire is not sinful in and of itself, but Satan can use that selfish or that fleshly desire against you to lure you away from God. God can use that same fleshly desire to encourage you to be faithful, but Satan uses it to he uses it against you. So maybe my definition is wrong, or maybe I can't explain it fully, but as I read the Genesis account there of Adam and Eve, I don't see a sinful, or I do see sinful, a rebellious attitude in Adam and Eve. I see someone who they had the truth, they were lied to, and they were deceived about that truth. They were told a lie, and they believed the lie. Has anybody ever done that? Believed the lie? When you knew the truth, you had the truth, and you were told a lie, and you believed it? Anybody ever done that? Yeah, I think probably all of us have. Somebody had a hand up. I went to a lectureship, Men's Day, yesterday over in, where did we go? Dalton. We went to Dalton. And that subject was brought up. The second speaker that we had, he turned to 1 Corinthians 16, and he noticed 5 commands there in the, I don't know what verses it was, but 31 and 32 I think it was. But one of those is stand fast. And that he tells us to stand fast. You consider the context of Corinth, or the Corinthian church. Many of them weren't. There were a lot of divisive issues, problematic issues in the Corinthian church. And so he writes in this letter, stand fast. And he went into a great explanation of that, but it goes back to what you're saying. There's going to be a lot of appeal from the world for us not to stand fast. And Paul encourages us, he strongly admonishes us in the closing of that letter, stand fast. No matter what's happening out there, no matter who's drawing you away, stand fast. And it's really a great lesson, and I'm going to preach that one of these days. It's just was a good topic. But anyway, my point here is that these Adam and Eve should have stood fast. Paul hadn't written them the letter to the second of Corinthians as yet, so they didn't. That's not the reason they didn't stand fast. They were deceived. They were told a lie. They believed the lie. They had the truth, but they did not follow with the truth. They followed the lie. And in a definition of the word rebellion, that's true. They rebelled. They went against the authority of God. But that's not the common definition that we think of, at least me, when I think of rebellion. And in fact, I was surprised to find this, or learn this when I was working on this lesson. The term rebellion is not used in that way in the Bible. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but that's not the way the word that's used to describe what happened. If you look in the book of Romans, chapter 5, in verse 19, it uses the word disobedience. And the Greek word there has to do with, it's a compound word that has to do with listening or not listening. The prefix is not listening, not hearing correctly, or not hearing in a way that you absorbed. It says that sin entered into the world by one man's not hearing. He heard, but he didn't properly respond. He didn't let it sink in like it should have. So also by one man's obedience, Paul would say in the same or the next verse, one man's disobedience, the word is parakuo. Akuo meaning hearing, hearing with hearing, but with another man's obedience, same word, different prefix. I can't pronounce it in Greek. I can only mispronounce it. So just the word has to do with hearing, with the end being he actually did what he heard. Active hearkening is how the word is defined. So Adam, rebellion is not the word used. It's didn't hear to the point of letting it conduct his decisions. Jesus did hear in such a way that it would affect his decision. So we got disobedience and obedience, wherein we often think of the words rebellion and, in Jesus' case, obedience. But my point is not that Adam didn't rebel against authority. He did. He sinned. He fell short of the glory of God because he chose to do something different than what God said. But it was because, and I don't mean but as an excuse for him, it was because he listened more attentively to the lie than he did to the truth. He acted upon, he obeyed the lie instead of obeying the truth. Going back to the question, why do some people have a heart for God and some do not? Let me ask it this way. Do children from the same parents, two children from the same parents, have different temperaments? Anybody have more than one kid? You know that sometimes they're alike. Sometimes they're as different as night and day with their temperaments. And because it can be recognized, because parents, adults, have the ability to recognize that this child is not the same as this child, they should treat each child according to their disposition. Yes or no? I think we work with our children as we are, or as they come, or as they develop, and we try to work with them according to their own temperament. If you take a strong-willed child and you feed him according to the ways of the world, you're going to sow the wind and reap the whirlwind. If you feed that strong-willed, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being independent. That's not the point. The point is if he has a strong will and you allow that free rein without any constraint, without any guidance, you're going to sow the wind and reap the whirlwind. I don't think, having said that, I don't think one child is prone to do evil while another child is prone to do good. That's not the implication of what I'm trying to say. I think we all have spirits created in the image of God, and it's placed within a fleshly body. God gave us flesh. God appeals to the flesh to live in the flesh according to the Spirit. Satan gives us this big lie, live in the flesh according to the flesh. But God he gave us this gift of the flesh, and he says, use it as a blessing. Use it according to the guidance of the Spirit, your spirit, and let God guide your spirit. Satan Again, he appeals to the flesh according to the flesh. One is eternal, the other is not. And each of us gets to make the choice, the direction of which we will go. But when a child, for whatever reason, turns to rebellion, now we're going to get the big ugly definition of rebellion here. Not simply mishearing, I heard what you said, but I didn't understand what you said, or not inattention. He heard what you said, but he wasn't paying attention to what you said. He wasn't deliberately going against you, but he just didn't. It's not necessarily being deceived and acting upon that deception. Now, I want to think about when a child or any person turns to rebellion in that first definition that we gave. Someone who actively acts against authority. I don't want what you have to offer. I am going a different direction. If a child, and I don't know what age child we're imagining, but someone who's able to make that decision, old enough to make that decision of choosing rebellion, not just makes a mistake, not just didn't pay attention, but chooses active rebellion. How do you fix that? Ma'am? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes there are no right answers. You try everything you can do. And parents, anybody here perfect parent? Did your job perfectly? No mistakes? I didn't either. I made lots of mistakes. And I regularly call or write my kids and tell them, I blew it on this. And I ask your forgiveness on this. But sometimes you can do your best, try your best to lead them according to God's word, and sometimes they just don't want it. Maybe it's because they the sphere of influence that they have at school or online or whatever it is, but they have been fed a lie. They like what the lie says. They like what it promises, and that's the choice they want to make, even though they know it's not something they might know or could know. They know from your guidance, from your instruction, that's not a good way to go, but that's what I want. How do you fix that? And the only answer is prayer is helpful for a right spirit in me to know how to address that. But sometimes nothing that you can do helps. Sometimes they have so made their decision. It's not that they can't be taught or they can't be redirected, but they have so firmly made their decision, they don't want to be changed. They like where this is going or where it's going, and that's what they want to be. And if a person is unteachable, what can you do? It's hard. I promise you. If you've never been there, I'm thankful that you've not ever been there, but it's hard. A friend of mine, he's not from around here. It's nobody you know, so don't try to associate in your mind somebody, oh, I know he's talking about him. You don't know this person. I promise you don't. I'm not going to tell you where I know him from because I don't want anybody who's online might look, oh, I know who it is. He called me 2 or 3 weeks ago. He has 2 grown daughters, adult daughters, and one of those daughters has a daughter, his granddaughter, who claims to be a boy. I don't know how old she is at this point, but she's changed her appearance and her life to accommodate that claim that she is a boy. And my friend, the father, the grandfather, is severely, strongly berated by his two daughters because he refuses to use accommodating language for the granddaughter. She's a girl. I'm going to call her a girl. He's not trying to offend her, not trying to be ugly, but he's not going to condescend to the world's way of thinking that she wants to be a boy, you need to call her a boy. She wants to be called a he, or all the pronouns that are out there, whatever it is that she wants to be called, you need to accommodate by calling that person according to the pronouns that they have chosen. Where did the granddaughter get the idea to think that she was or is a boy? Well, I don't know if I can fully answer that question because that slipped up on me in this society, me not having any clue that the world was ever going to go in that direction. You know, I know people choose to have sexual relations with whomever they want to, but to make the choice, make the decision to think, I'm whatever the opposite sex is, that's what I am, and that's what I'll be. I don't know where that came from. I don't know how that came to be. I can't explain it. I don't believe the babble that's spouted by the world to convince us that she's actually acting upon the reality that's on the inside. We have a word for that in Tennessee, hogwash. I don't know if that's what do y'all have a word for that over here? There was when I was in school, some preacher said something, and this is what the world thinks or whatever, and he called it gnat's puke. I like that one. He must be from Georgia because Georgia has all the gnats, and whatever gnat's puke is, that's what that is. Anyway, that the granddaughter aside, and how she may have been convinced, and I have my own ideas as to how that happened in our environment and that she was raised up in. But the bigger question to me is, where did the daughter, the mother and the aunt, get the idea that the child's thoughts like that, I'm a girl but I want to be a boy, should be pandered to? Where did the parents, in this case aunt and mother, get the idea that she wants to be lived like that, then that's what we'll call him? Where does that come from? Somebody said something. Comes from the world? Yeah. Comes from a really perverse world. Sir? School, it happens in the school. Yes, ma'am. Social media is, yeah, that's one of my points. But social media, that's something you and I didn't grow up with, right? Our social media was a telephone that you did that to, and we didn't have access to the kind of things. If you wanted to find something out going on in the world, you go to the encyclopedia, you look it up, and you find out what that means. But nowadays you got Google, Google is not that encyclopedias were, but Google is not directed by God. Yes, ma'am. You know, that's a good point. Fear is one of the driving forces that make parents do what this parent did. Whether it's fear that the child will commit suicide, I don't know. But another fear that parents have is, if I don't pander to what he or she thinks or believes, and I address that strongly, what's going to happen to my relationship with my son or daughter? We don't want that. We want to be friends with our children, and I want to be friends with my children, but do I in an effort to be friends with my children, condone that which is going to damn them eternally. Whether it's this concept of gender confusion or some other, if my child chooses to drink alcohol and be a sloppy drunk, am I going to say, well, no, I don't want to offend them, I don't want to drive them away, so I'll buy them a bottle of Jim Beam? Is it Jim Beam? Jim Daniels? Whatever it is. I'll buy them that and help them out. Is that the right perspective? Somebody had a hand up over here. Yes, ma'am. You're next. Well, you're not going to talk bad about the Fonz, are you? Yeah. Well, you're not allowed to not accept it. In their environment that they're growing up in, you have to accept. You cannot judge another person for whatever decisions they're making. And so you have to accept it. According to the predominant theory, I won't blame it on the schools alone. It is in the schools. Sometimes it's not. But that environment, that growing up environment, they are being desensitized to what is right and what is wrong. And there is no wrong. If he makes that choice, that's his choice, and it's okay for him. You don't have to make that choice, but you can't condemn that choice. Well, that's it's leading to all the problems. Yes, sir.
It's very pervasive. The first example I have in our extended family was the man. He's over 18. He goes to his grandmother and says, "The doctor told me I should have been a woman." So the medical, it was in Maryland, which is an extremely progressive, far left state. At any rate, the doctor's lying to the kid. He's lying.
He went outside of his place as the doctor in that sense, in my opinion. But David?
I think God has given us a lot of examples in the Old Testament about similar things. One that comes to mind is the children of Israel. They had the strong hand of Moses. They didn't always agree with him, but he was strong enough to stand for what God was teaching them. And when we went up the mountain, Aaron was not strong enough. And he allowed them to do what they wanted to do, make a golden calf and whatever else went on. They rebelled against God.
Yeah.
And it takes a strong hand somewhere.
It does. And Aaron was in the position to use a strong hand. He chose to condescend to their fleshly desires. Yeah, he gave into it. And then in the end, when Moses addressed him, he blamed it on the people. That's what they wanted. Oh. Yeah. Next week, we're supposed to do it this week, but y'all talk too much. The next week, I want to go to Romans chapter 1, where God addresses this situation and how the people that he speaks about in that chapter came to be like they were as he spoke of them in that chapter. I'm speaking in circles. But you know Romans chapter 1. If you don't, read Romans chapter 1 when you get home. And we're going to talk about that next week and how the people of whom he spoke there came to be like he is described, they are described there, and what God did about it. We're looking at the question, why do some people have a heart for God and some people do not, and how do you fix rebellion? And ever how you define rebellion is active rebellion again. I hate God, or I didn't listen and I chose to disobey God rather than obey him. Ever how you define that, how do you fix it? Well, the people we're going to read about in Romans chapter 1 are people who made a determined, defiant choice to turn away from God. And we'll see what God did about that. Our subject matter for the whole lesson, and we'll get back to it eventually, is having a heart for God, and in this case, a trusting heart. We need to be able to trust God. A heart for God is one who trusts God. And the people of Romans chapter 1, they made a deliberate choice not to. And there was a response from God to that. And that's what we'll look at next week. Any questions? Any further comment? I said you talk too much. That's what I'm looking for. I want this to be a class of conversation, not just of lecture. I want us to be able to voice what we're thinking, and I appreciate so much your comments. John. Where's that corner at? That corner's full. I need to